Hold on 1 second. It is there it goes.
Recording
Okay,
in
you're good.
progress.
So good afternoon. I want to call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order, today being June 7, and it is 3 p.m. and we have all members of the Finance Committee present. So we'll go ahead and start our meeting. This was to be and is to be a joint meeting with the African Heritage Reparations Assembly. Have to get the title exactly right. And I think that we do not have a quorum yet present from the assembly, so that that we'll call that meeting to order, or it will be called to order if when we get to that time. So in the meantime, I need to, I think I've lost my agendas, the problem for today's meeting.
I'll find it.
Do you have it to put up on the
I'll get it for
screen?
you. Yep.
Okay, and because I'll go through the agenda quickly now, and then we'll come back to it in a little bit later. And so what I'm going to do as Lynn's getting the agenda, I'll tell you a little bit about what the plan is for today's meeting, and then we will come back when say some of this again in a minute. But we're going to start. The plan originally was to try and start as a combined meeting and then work on our other agenda items. But I think I'd like to pick up on one of the other agenda items if we need to, and I'll probably, because we told Guilford Mooring, who is going to be here for the Centennial Water Treatment Plant, and Dave Zomack, who's going to be here for the North Common discussion, that they could come a little bit later. So that that was because we had this understanding about the order in which we were going to be starting things, and I'll explain a little bit about the process as we go along. But in any event, let me finish getting the meeting, our Finance Committee meeting, called to order. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, extended by Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting is being conducted via remote means. Members of the public who wish to attend the meeting can do so by Zoom, by telephone, and while no in-person attendance, members of the public is being permitted, we're making every effort to make sure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time by technological means. And we will have public comment during the meeting, which is an important part of what we do. But in any event, with that said, what I would like to do is to go ahead and ask each member of the Finance Committee to confirm that we can hear, that they can hear me and we can hear them. And then when we actually get to the also calling the assembly to order, I'll then ask that we go around again to introduce ourselves to members of the assembly, and we'll be asking them to do the same for us. So Lynn, can you hear? And
Yes, present.
Bob?
I'm here.
Matt?
Present, thank
Yeah, Bernie?
Present.
And Michelle?
Here.
Kathy?
Yes. Here.
And Alicia?
Here.
Okay, so our committee is present at this point. Michelle, is there anybody else that's joined that you know of?
So
Alexis just joined us. She was setting up for Amherst Media. Irv sends his regrets. He had a dental emergency and is actually unable to speak. He said it was okay to share that. And I thought that Yvonne and Dr. Shabazz were going to be joining us, but I don't see them yet. And I've texted both of them. So maybe it would be good to start with something else and then see if they arrive, if you're okay with that, Andy. And if Hala and Alexis and Jennifer are good with that as well.
Okay. Yes, and so we'll save introductions until we see if you have a quorum. We will discuss reparations nonetheless, but we want to give as much time for others from the assembly to join as we can. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Andy. That's perfect.
Okay. And so Sean, is there an item that you would recommend that we take up first from the agenda? I would assume the capital improvement program, but you may have a different suggestion.
No, I think that's a great idea. That one I think is we're all here for that one.
Okay, and I think that everybody is see, I think that all the two members of the Finance Committee were at the forum last night, which turned out to be pretty much of a non-event on the forum side. There was not a lot of comment that was offered regarding the capital improvement plan, and it has been submitted. We did talk about it at 2 meetings in the first week in May. And so at this point, I think it's really just a question at this point as to whether there are any matters from the proposed capital improvement program that people want to ask about or speak to. And so why don't we pause and see if there's members of the Finance Committee who have any matters that they want to raise. Kathy.
I don't want to be repetitive because I raised this last year also with a similar question, but one of the things you can see in the out years, starting actually in the coming year, is at the beginning of the 4 capital projects with both the schematic design, fire station, DPW, and base. So I just want to have our meeting notes say that we still need to revisit this, and the modeling that led to that capital plan still needs to be revisited. I'm fine with the capital plan as it is because it doesn't really affect FY23. FY23, we've already authorized the library, which I guess is still uncertain. When we were in JCPC, you said its debt might start to show up in 23, but might not be till 2024. It sort of depends on the timeline for construction. Is that still correct?
Yeah, no, I think everything you said is right. I think, and I hope I mentioned this during the presentation of the capital improvement program, that the number specifically related to the 4 building projects will change as we update that model. Obviously, since we developed that model, we've seen rapid inflation, construction costs, and interest rates have started to go back up. So I suspect as we update the model in the next year's capital improvement program, you'll see some significant changes to those numbers. And then as it relates to the Jones Library, yeah, some of it's the timing of when that debt hits is related to the timing of when construction starts, but it's also related to the timing of when we borrow. And we're working with our financial advisor to identify when the most advantageous time is. We're sort of in this area of rising interest rates and a looming recession, and so trying to get the best rate for the town is what we're trying to do. Again, working with our financial advisor to do that.
Yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up because this will be a theme of the Finance Committee's reports. FY23 looks fine. If you go out a couple of years, we're in deficit. although I know there's a lot of uncertainty in those out years. And we put in, this year, we put in this special pool of money because each piece of equipment we started to buy, we would say we wanted to buy it in September, and by December it was a different price. So we've got a pool of money for volatility that hopefully will get us through FY23. I mean, that is what that is there for. So I just want to underscore that, similar to the operating budget, right now we're looking at a world that, as we get into later years, it's extremely tight budget.
So the other thing that I'm thinking about is, to follow up on what Kathy just said, is that really we have new members of the Finance Committee and of course new members of the council too, who have not had any presentation of the model whatsoever to understand even how it was structured to work and what the theory was behind it. And I'm becoming more and more sensitive to it because we received some questions at council level, and I've been writing the report. And if you've looked at draft 1, and I'm now working on draft 2, I have pieces in there that refer back to the model and how and why we built up the stabilization fund, and why we're anticipating now the use of the stabilization fund. I really think it might be time, even if we just make it clear that this is a sample, an example, but severely outdated and the numbers are irrelevant, to at least to a presentation, so that there's an understanding of how the model developed over time and what kind of decision points get made within the process.
When you say this is the time, Andy, do you mean right now, today?
Not today.
Okay.
But
No,
I mean soon.
no, I think I've talked to Paul about this. We're going to be working, I would say this month, we will be getting the tool updated. As Kathy knows, our estimates of the town share for the school project keep changing pretty widely. And so we're working with our designer and our OPM to really nail it down, what the range is for the town share. And then we know what the library share is. And then with the DPW and the fire station, it ultimately comes down to, what the town can afford. So we will be working, I would say, the next couple of weeks and before the end of the month to get a model updated. And then I can work with the town manager and the chair of the council to figure out how we present that updated model.
Lynn?
Andy, I know, I see Lynn's hand is up, and I wasn't saying that needs to be done now, but really soon in July, because the assumption was the school building wouldn't draw it all on reserves. And we, depending on what we think we can, what the town share is of that startlingly high budget, we may need to be taking a look at that again. I'm not saying with a conclusion, but just that we may need to open the door to that discussion.
Okay. Amilcar, I see that you're here and just want to say hi. We started a little bit of finance committee while we're waiting for more members of the assembly to be here, but we're going to switch to the joint meeting when Michelle indicates it's time.
Andy, do you need me to call the meeting to order, since I believe that we have a quorum at this point?
Yes, probably. That if you have a quorum, you should do that.
Okay, so calling to order the meeting of the African Heritage Reparation Assembly at 3:16 p.m. And we can make sure everyone can be heard when we come back to it, if that works.
Okay, and we already have made a disclosure for the meeting regarding the open meeting law requirements and the exceptions, so I don't think you need to repeat that. Lynn, your hand is up. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me just jump back to the model for a moment. At the point that Sean and Paul signal that we're ready, the question is whether this should be a presentation to the full council or to the finance committee to begin with. The full council has a meeting on the 27th of June and then again on the 18th of July. The Finance Committee has not scheduled its meetings. I have a bias about this baby going to the full council, but excuse me, I don't know if that is reasonable. And so that's my one question. And then frankly, I'm ready to make a motion on the capital improvement program.
Okay, as far as doing it to, I would say that when Sean is ready, that we might consider a joint meeting at a council time and make it an item that's at a set time so that finance committee members who are resident members who only want to attend that portion of the meeting, they know when it is.
So Sean and Paul, the real issue is July 18th, or because the next one is tentative, if we even need to have it, and that's August 1st.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk with the town manager. I think July 18th
Yep,
is
fine.
reasonable, but we'll just have to make, if there's any major pieces of information that would withhold, would stall us from updating it, we can let you know.
Okay, great. So I'm done with that question. I'm ready to move on to motions for capital improvement.
Okay, actually, don't we have orders
Yes,
available? Or so what we need to do is get the orders on the screen and then have motions to recommend orders specifically. So when Sean gets those available for us.
Can you see my screen?
Lynn's got it up there.
I can see it.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead then.
I move that we recommend to the town council approval of appropriation and transfer order FY 23-05A.
Is there a second?
I second, Shane seconds.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor that's been seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. No, oh, wait a minute. Lynn, your hand is still up. Is there further more that you want to say at this
Take it
point?
down. I just can't reach it
Okay.
right now.
Okay, that's all right. So I just wanted to check. What we do, and I'm saying this for our guests at the meeting, that since we have resident members of the committee who are non-voting members, and which is by the charter, and we have 5 members who are members of the who are voting members because they're members of the council. The way that we proceed is alphabetically, and the resident members indicate whether they are in support or not support of the motion that's on the floor, and members who are counselors vote. So that's what's going to happen next. So we'll start with Matt Holloway.
Yes, support.
Bernie Kubiak.
Support.
Michelle Miller.
Yes.
Kathy. Jane.
Yes,
And I'm a yes. Alicia Walker.
Yes.
Lynn Griesmer.
Yes.
And Bob Hegner.
Support.
Okay, so we have a motion that carries 5-0 with all 3 resident members in support.
And then there's a second one, which I'll put up on the screen.
this is the debt authorization, correct?
Yeah.
There's actually going to be 3 altogether.
3 debt
Is
authorization.
this the correct one?
This is the debt authorization. Yep.
Okay. So I move that we recommend to the town council that they approve appropriation and borrowing authorization order FY 23-06.
Shane seconds.
You said there were three, but there are only two borrowings listed, A and B.
Sorry, there's three orders. The final order
it.
is the
Okay.
stabilization. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor made by Lynn, Kathy seconded. Any discussion on the motion that's on the floor, Kathy?
Yes, I would just like when we do the report, Andy, Lynn read the short title of it. I would like the rest of the words to come in order approving alteration, but so people know when they're reading it that one is for the borrowing and one is for the cash. So it's just a request to add the rest of the sentence that Lynn didn't read.
I actually would take that as a friendly amendment to both motions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, duly noted, and our minute taker also please take note of the change. So any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move down one on the list and start with Bernie.
Support the motion?
Michelle,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes,
I'm a yes. And Alicia,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Bob,
Support.
and Matt.
Support.
So it's 5-0 with 3 members, resident members in support. So Lynn, you have the third order.
Getting it?
So this last order is specifically the stabilization fund, and we put it with capital because it's really intended to support the initial debt payment for the Jones Library project.
Okay, so I move that we recommend to the town council approval of appropriation and transfer order FY 23-14B, Town of Amherst Stabilization Fund transfer to balance the FY 23 budget.
second, Jane.
Okay, any questions or discussion?
Andy, in the write-up, is this the one where when we bring it to the full council, there needs to be a 2/3 vote to bring the money in? So we would just need to note that when you do the report back to the council.
Yes, and it says it's on the order itself.
In the order.
Just an order appropriating that line.
Yeah, I just think that maybe everyone very carefully reads 2/3. I just, I don't doubt that this will get a 2/3 vote, but I just want people to understand that when we do that, it's a 2/3 vote because we're bringing money out of the stabilization fund.
Yes, and I'm quite confident that if nobody else brings it up at the meeting, that Athena will make sure it gets brought up.
We also write the motions so that they have the required vote in them. The borrowing one also required 2/3.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, then we'll go ahead and vote, and then we can complete this item. And then I can ask Michelle if she wants to proceed with the next agenda item being the discussion on reparations. So vote. Michelle,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes,
I'm a yes. Alicia,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Bob,
Support.
Matt,
Support.
and Bernie.
Support.
So I think that, again, we have 5-0 with 3 members, resident members in support. Kathleen, would you like to move on, have us move on to the next agenda item being the discussion on the reparations?
If I'm Kathleen, then.
I said, didn't I say, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yes, that would be great. Unfortunately, I don't think Yvonne's going to be able to make it, and we know that Irv is not. So I think we have everyone here that is going to be here.
Michelle, we do have a phone number in the audience. I don't know if I'll just tell that person to, if you're a member of the AHRA, to raise your hand. And I'm not just, who knows how to raise your hand on a phone?
*9, isn't it?
Hit *9 on your phone if you are a member, and I'll bring you into the room.
Thank you, Sean. That's a good call.
I think you can go ahead. They haven't raised their hand.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is, actually, I have a question for you, Michelle, and that is, do you have a request as to, or any suggestion as to when you would like to have public comment offered?
That's a really good question. I think let's start our introductions and discussion and then maybe move to public comment after that. Does that work on your end?
Yes, that's fine with me. So why don't I ask each of the members of the Finance Committee to just introduce themselves, indicate, just in a sentence or two, who they are, or as far as what the relationship is to the committee, and anything that they want to say in introduction, and then have you do the same for members of the assembly. So I'll keep with the alphabetical, but just move down one. Kathy, why don't you go first?
Just, Andy, I missed what we're doing.
Just introduce yourself,
Oh,
what district you
oh,
represent,
okay.
that
We're
kind of thing.
introducing- Okay, I'm Kathy Shane, and I'm a counselor, District 1 counselor, and I'm a member of the Finance Committee.
Okay, and I think that people are probably getting to know that I'm Andy Steinberg, and I'm the chair of the Finance Committee. I'm a counselor at large, and previous experience on the select board, and before that on the old Finance Committee as it existed in our former form of government. Alicia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Walker. I am an at-large counselor and a member of the Finance Committee.
Lynn?
Lynn Griesmer, District 2 Counselor, President of the Council, and member of the Finance Committee.
Bob?
Bob Hegner. I'm a resident member of the Finance Committee. I've been in Amherst for 22 years.
Okay, Matt?
Hey there, everybody. My name is Matt Holloway. I'm a resident member of the Finance Committee. Fairly new, been on for about 3 or 4 months now. Only been in town for about 3 years. And I'm also co-chair of the Amherst Cultural Council.
And Bernie?
I am Bernie Kubiak, a member of the old Finance Committee, now a resident member of the new Finance Committee. I live down here in South Amherst.
So Michelle, you can say whatever you want in introduction, but then take us and make sure that the members of the assembly introduce themselves to the members of the Finance Committee.
Excellent. And I also wanted to mention that Kathy is the chair of the school building committee. And so she didn't mention that. And everyone knows, I think I'm Michelle Miller. I am a town councilor. I am also the chair of the African Heritage Reparation Assembly. So sort of wearing 2 hats today. I'm on the Finance Committee, and I also chair the GOL committee. And we can just go, I'll start, I guess, in the order that I see folks on the screen. So Hala, do you want to start and introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is Hala Lord. I'm on the African Heritage Reparations Assembly, and I live in District 5.
And I see you, Dr. Shabazz.
Yes, Amilcar Shabazz. I've been living in Amherst since 2007 and right off Bay Road. And I am happy to be serving on the AHRA.
And Alexis?
Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm pretty sure in District 3. I feel a little bit embarrassed to say that, but I've been living in Amherst for 30 years.
And Jennifer is also here. I'm not sure if, oh, there.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Moisten. I'm the Assistant Director to Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and the Staff Liaison for the AHRA. And I've lived in Amherst 40 plus years.
I hope all of you know our town manager and our finance director. And so what we want to do is, at least today, start with a discussion in which the assembly under Michelle's leadership is going to explain what it is that the assembly is asking the finance committee and ultimately the council through the finance committee to consider. We're going to be able to have time for questions from members of the finance committee about the request, questions from members of the assembly about what they want to know about the town's finances and how the proposal last year was structured and what is envisioned or whatever is there, because this is, and the goal of this meeting is to make sure that we get to know each other, that we understand what the request is, we understand what the issues are that and questions are that the members of the committee and members of the assembly have about the decision and the process. We are limited in time because Sean and Paul have another meeting that is coming up, which is the Library Building Committee, of which they're both members. And that's a really important committee meeting. So we are time limited today, and we do have several other agenda items that the Finance Committee has to deal with today. But we wanted to get as far as we can today. If it gets to there's a consensus amongst the Finance Committee and some ability to conclude the discussion, we would do so. If not, we want to make substantial progress. So that was my introductory piece, and I think that Michelle's introductory piece is going to be to start by explaining a little bit about the request and take it from there. So, Michelle.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you for this opportunity for us to be together and have this discussion. Really appreciate it, and appreciate the time that you may have taken to read the memos that I've put out. I put one out a couple weeks ago and then one very late in the day today, so you may not have had a chance to read it. But essentially, we are here because our charge, the AHRA, and I just wanted to make this little note that it's the African Heritage Reparation Assembly. There's no S on it. We are charged with identifying an ongoing funding stream. And it is outlined in my memo that last year, about $210,000 was moved from free cash into the stabilization fund to basically to seed the fund as we were beginning our work. And that was modeled off of the cannabis tax revenue that was expected, or I don't know if I got this right, Sean, when I put it into the memo. I hope that I did, but I think it was modeled off the FY21 actual cannabis tax revenue.
Yeah, it was, I think that's right.
Okay, great. And so our request is actually twofold. We recognize that the budget has already been set for FY23. And so we're asking that for FY23, similar to last year, free cash would be moved into the account in the fall when it becomes available, similar to the model that was used last year off of the cannabis tax revenue. So that's one request. But for FY24 and going forward from there, we're asking that the town council designate the cannabis tax revenue for reparations. And, you know, it's understandable. I tried to address several of the concerns that I heard in the council meeting when this was originally presented. But again, I just want to remind us that our number one goal was to identify an ongoing funding source. And after very careful consideration and research, we determined that the cannabis tax revenue is the best source of revenue for reparations. And in order for us to move forward with our work and to develop a plan, and to be able to consult with members of the Black community and engage the community as a whole, having a sense that there is a stable, ongoing revenue stream that is going to be developing this fund is really important. And so given that our timeline expires in June 2023, and given the way that the budget cycle works, we are bringing forward this request now. The cannabis tax revenue is not something that has been really discussed, as I understand it, in terms of where it should go. And I think that in the memo and in our last council meeting, we've made the case for why we believe that reparations is the right place for it. So I do want to turn it over to any of the AHRA members who may want to add to what I've just framed there, and then of course, open it up for further discussion. So if Hala or Dr. Shabazz or Alexis, Jennifer, anyone would like to add to what I've said, please raise your hand. And yes, Alexis.
I'm going to keep this very brief, unlike I normally do. So I guess I just wanted to say that I would like to encourage you all to avoid the temptation of pitting marginalized groups who are all deserving of reparative justice against each other. I strongly believe that race-exclusive discrimination deserves race-exclusive reparative programs, and your recommendation is a step towards tangible change that our African heritage community can be very encouraged by. So thank you for your consideration.
Oh, anyone else on the assembly? Yes, Dr. Shabazz, I see your hand.
Thank you. I'll also endeavor to keep this brief. Denver, Colorado led the way in terms of municipalities in the United States of America in beginning to look at, in terms of collecting revenues from cannabis sales. And if we look at what they've done, they really have taken a look at that revenue stream and tried to use at least part of those funds in ways that attempt to rectify or repair harms that were done, particularly when marijuana was illegal. But even going beyond that, in terms of other kinds of social reparative measures beyond fixing potholes and all the other things that come out of our general fund that we do in that. And I think it's something for us to look at here. But in terms of this particular pool of revenues, how to particularly try to use it in ways that encourage our young people, encourage people to avoid marijuana use, encourage our people to have other things to do than to go and smoke marijuana. So there are a lot of different things we can think about, both for the community impact fees as well as for the revenues collected from the taxes that ought to be looked at in a reparative way. But I want to say one other thing in terms of where we're at in terms of the assembly, or I'll speak specifically for myself. It's really hard to begin to go to the African heritage community in Amherst and start a real consultative process about repair and about confronting the harms that our community has undergone and what kinds of things could happen here in Amherst when we have no idea of any sort of budget for this other than the $200K or 200,000 or so that's in the current stabilization fund. And so right now, trying to go out there, we really have an issue in terms of like managing expectations. Because if that's it, if that's all this council thinks it can do, then we need to know that. And then we're going into the community and say, look, we got 200K, what can we do? But if we're thinking of something larger, something more robust, something tied to perhaps this cannabis tax revenue from which we can plan and we can develop a real plan that goes beyond just 200K to look at years out, the kinds of things that can be done, then that's a totally different message that we can go into the African-American Black community and begin to consult with them about the harms and about the repair. So it's very important, I think, that this council, that this finance committee recommend to the council to really confront this now, giving us a clear sense of what kinds of revenue possibilities we have to look at in terms of a reparative justice plan. Because otherwise it's very difficult for me to imagine going into the African heritage community to really talk about a plan for addressing the harms that have been experienced in our community without any sense of what kinds of revenue we're committing, we're reserving to put behind this work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Shabazz.
So I too want to thank both of our recent speakers, because I think that it has helped to frame the discussion and increase the understanding. And I don't think that anybody is going to be surprised that Finance Committee's concern always is the fact that our resources are limited and that we've got a lot of pressures on the town as far as what the expectations are. And we've actually increased the pressure on ourselves in the last year by creating 2 new programs that hadn't existed before and trying to fund those programs at the same time that we're trying to maintain what we're doing now. Obviously, I'm referring to CREST and DEI. But let me ask Sonia for one piece of information, if it's available. If not, you obviously just tell us. And that is, do you have an estimate at this point yet for the years to what we might have in the way of cannabis revenue from excise tax, that portion of it?
I do not at the moment. It did go down quite a bit because one of the establishments closed down. So I don't have that now, but the timing I'm just trying to understand what the process is here that everyone's trying to get, because we can't do anything with free cash until it's recertified. And that isn't going to happen until October. And it's too late to do it for this year's free cash because you have to have a public forum for this appropriation and it has to go through that whole process. I believe, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm so little.
I don't believe we had a public forum when this was decided last year, but
it's an appropriation.
I think we did do a public forum. It was combined with multiple others because we did a road allocation and sidewalks, this transfer. So I think it was all part of one, but because it's an appropriation, we think you still have to do the public forum the way we do for other appropriations.
So that part of it couldn't happen until after free cash is recertified.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody who needs an explanation of what we mean in the terms of free cash certification and the history of how we've transferred funds from free cash to stabilization funds in general? Because that sort of a core understanding of how the timetable works. I don't want to repeat information that's already available, but if there's a request for that answer, then either Sean or I will provide it.
Andy, can I just follow up on that real quick?
Yes.
We'll double check on the hearing. I guess I do want to double check on that. Sonia, just whether we've done hearings in past years when we just transfer to the regular stabilization fund, because it's similar to that. And I just want to clarify. So this, the request is to do this in the fall, right? The request is to do this in the fall when free cash is certified.
Yes, there's no question on that. We're just looking to get some indication from the finance committee, or really from the town council, that will be the decision when the money becomes available in the fall. Andy, I see Paul's hands up, but
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear what we're asking for. So are we looking at two different things? One is an action in the fall, and then from that point forward, saying every year the cannabis excise tax is going to be put into the stabilization fund. And I guess a question to Sonia is, when do we, this is a money that's collected by the state. When do we know what that number is? Like what time of year would we learn what that number is that we collected in the prior fiscal year?
I think a safe timeline would be the end of July.
So end of July every year, we'll know what cannabis tax was put into, what has been given to the town through the state, right?
Yes.
And if the council says we want to dedicate those funds to reparations, how would you see that working?
I think that if there's a vote to dedicate those funds to reparation, then they would just automatically get, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, because I just read this once, but I think it just gets automatically dedicated to the stabilization fund.
Yeah, let me just clarify. So I think we're combining two things. So
Okay.
I think, and Michelle and anybody else on the AHRA, correct me if I'm wrong. So what you want to do is transfer an amount equivalent to what we receive in FY22 into the stabilization fund. So that would, not a dedication, but transferring it literally into that fund. And that's the number, again, we'll know at the end of July, and the free cash will be certified sometime in October. So that's when that would happen. Then there would be a separate action to dedicate future revenues, future cannabis revenues to go into the stabilization fund, beginning with FY24's cannabis revenues, because FY23 is part of this budget. So that vote theoretically, you'd want that to also be in the fall. So when we do our budget planning and our budget process, before we go and forecast revenues that are going to support the overall budget, we'd want to know if that revenue is going to be dedicated to something else, so that we wouldn't include it in our budget planning. So I think both of these things would have to be voted in the fall if we wanted to do it in the most sort of planned out way.
So it's my understanding there's two actions. One is to take action to put money into the stabilization fund in the fall, and we'll know exactly what that number is if we're going to continue to tie it to cannabis revenue. And the second is to establish a policy of the council to, from this day forward, dedicate those cannabis funds to go into the reparations.
And by this day forward, meaning July 1st, 2023.
Yes.
Yes, but the council would need to do that in the fall of 2022, so that we know going forward when we prepare our budget that that's what the council wants to do. So there's two separate actions the council would be looking at doing.
That's right. That is the request. And whether it's voted now or voted in the fall, I'm not sure if it matters from your perspective. From our perspective, it does matter in the sense that we would like to have that sense of security that or at least have some knowing about where we're headed. And so we would prefer, and what we're requesting is that this gets back to the council sooner than later to be voted upon. And part of it is we've built a lot of momentum. We've worked really hard putting these memos together, getting public to come out and to speak to this. There are other demands on the budget, and we understand that. And for us, our objective is to secure this stream of revenue and to secure it now. And so that is what we're requesting. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not open to having further communication, answering questions. I'd be happy to go through some of the items that are here in the memo that I picked up from our last meeting. If folks want me to go through those, or perhaps they're a good place to start. I would like to hear from members of the Finance Committee, recognizing that this is a challenging conversation for us to be having, and we're all coming at it from different perspectives. But I would like to get the sense while we're here of the committee, so we know what we need to do, how far off we are. As Andy said, if we have some consensus today, we may be able to move this forward sooner. And of course, you know, the recommendation from here is a recommendation, and ultimately the council will have to decide on these things. So I'm curious if there are members of the committee that would be willing to speak to this at this point.
Yeah, I see 3 hands up from the committee, so I recognize them in order and say if any questions that I have until after we get other questions out. My brilliant committee may ask all the questions. I don't need to ask anything, but start with Bernie.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks to Michelle for doing a considerable amount of research and writing on this. I'm not going to be able to add much new to what's already been said, but I would offer my support for pegging reparation funding to the cannabis excise tax. If the town's serious about going forward with reparation, then it makes sense to provide a predictable source of revenue, to provide some security, and again, a peg to hang that promise on. And it'll also, I think, take us out of the annual discussion of how much and from where, which can pull the focus away from what should be happening in terms of the purpose of the project, the reparation project. So I just, again, I can't add anything new. It's all been said, but I can add my support.
So Kathy?
I too thank you for amazingly and wonderfully clear memos, Michelle, and then the explanation of what the ask is. I'm uncomfortable about committing now because I would like, I saw in the charge, to have a plan for how we might be spending this. And even if it's conceptual, that we know we can spend it in specific legal ways. I don't need to know, X dollars for this and Y dollars for that in terms of an allocation. Because I think watching you've pointed out Illinois, we have a couple pioneers out there, but along the way there have been challenges. So I would like to have a better sense of how we might be spending it. And I very much appreciate Dr. Shabazz saying, with $210,000 seed money, you have something to begin with. There's something quite real here. And I'm not at all saying that might be the end of it, but you can do fundraising around it. You can get people excited that Amherst has put itself on the map. But I've been watching, I'm really worried about the fiscal situation of the town. And yes, the cannabis tax in the current budget is only $150,000 penciled in, but that only is being used and may really be used. FY23 looks pretty good. FY24 looks shaky, and FY25 looks really bad. As we look just in terms of keeping our schools going, keeping the CREST program, the 4 firefighters are funded by ARPA money right now. There's a hole when we go out a couple of years. So I'd like to be at a more confident level. And so I'm thinking pushing this off for a year or 6 months or 8 months, where we had kind of a concrete plan. We know for sure we can spend the money in these legal ways. And I know we went to the state legislature to try to get special dispensation for this before I, as a finance committee member, commit to money. And I do understand the two asks, that in the fall, it could be an ask out of free cash. And I feel kind of the same way about free cash. It's free before we put it into the stabilization fund. But if we, as the chair of the school committee, I don't know how many of you have been paying attention to what that price tag is coming in at. It's going to be a huge ask of the residents of the town. And to the extent there's money in the stabilization fund to soften it. I mean, we haven't talked about touching it for the school yet. The taxpayers of the town, I think, need to rest assured that we're both on moral high ground on things we really feel strongly about, but we're also supporting the services that people care deeply about. So I'm at a discomfort level of making a decision now, meaning the timing doesn't work well for me. And so I know it's a chicken and egg. You sort of laid out, it's hard to say what you might spend it on till you know how much money you've got. But many of us have thought of what's our house and what would we want in the house. We at least lay out the house and then we figure out whether we can afford that house or not. But I think more elements, and you were due to have one of the tasks or the charges was a specific plan about which things both you might want to spend it on and which things we can legally spend it on. So I have both, I have those two questions, and I'll stop at there. So that's both a concern and a financial point of view on the timing of the ask.
Thank you, Kathy. If I could, Andy, just quickly clarify that I did outline in the latest memo some possible uses for the money. And these are places that we've identified as areas that would be benefits. And some of them include, and I just want to highlight this, the possibility of picking up on some of the recommendations from the Community Safety Working Group, like the BIPOC Cultural Center and the Youth Empowerment Center, and looking at those as community benefits. So just thinking about this in the way of a savings account and ways that we may, of course, any of this and all of this will be reinvested back into the community one way or another. So I do want to point that out for you to look at that.
Thank you. I want just for the sake of AHRA members who have not been at finance committee meetings before, the way we work when we have joint meetings that involve others besides the finance committee present is everybody just raises their hand if they have something to say, and I recognize hands in order in which they are raised, so that if you want to engage in the conversation, just please raise your hand, and it will be duly noted, and I'll proceed from there. Matt.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you, Michelle, and AHRA members. Really, this has been a tremendous amount of work, and I think, as Michelle has said, the eyes of the country are kind of on us. This is, we truly are doing something exciting here. Andy, I had a clarifying question before I kind of make my, I had some short thoughts, but what possible actions might finance take as a result of today's discussion, if any? And I would ask that of you or of anybody who wants to help me understand that. What's the charge for the finance committee here?
But Paul was sort of getting at that question a few minutes ago, and I would think that Sean can back this up, but one is to make a commitment now, which we would not normally do, about a transfer from free cash, or at least to say that we will make a transfer in the amount or recommended transfer at the appropriate time in the amount of the estimated FY22 revenue from cannabis, or is it FY23? But anyway, Sean will give.
Yeah, I think the two possible actions would be to recommend the transfer. You could recommend now the transfer to occur in the fall if you chose to. We don't have orders drafted for those yet, so we don't have orders ready to share, but they're sort of the same as they would be last year. And then the other action that the finance committee could recommend would be again in the fall, to take some action to dedicate the cannabis revenues for beginning FY24 to the stabilization fund.
And that'll be a recommendation to the council for, I'm sorry, just as a new member trying to get process straight. So that'll be a recommendation to the council for a vote.
Yeah, and then for the council, they would both be, I'm pretty sure they would both be required two-thirds votes, both for the transfer into the stabilization fund. And then I believe the dedication of a revenue to a stabilization fund is also a 2/3 vote.
Thank you. And I apologize if that was redundant. It's been a lot to kind of track the possibilities here. I think this is a really exciting time and a really exciting moment. Certainly I echo Kathy's concerns about overall funding, with inflation and the major capital projects and operating budgets being what they are, and positions running on ARPA. So I do recognize those things. At the same time, looking at the overall cannabis initiative statewide, looking at some of the required uses that the state has established for its regulation fund, just trying to get my head around sort of what the spirit and intent behind this law is. And as Michelle alluded to in her memo, there are public health questions, I think, that are associated with, legalization of cannabis that will require funds at some point to address, particularly, for the youth, but just across the board. So I think being mindful of, we are so early in the impact of introducing this new factor into our community that I would want to be mindful of some of those other needs that may arise, and that these revenue may be dedicated to. But, I did take a lot of guidance, I guess, from looking at the MGL, and, granted, the state takes 16% or so of revenue versus our 3%. But the MGL does call for, programming for restorative justice, jail diversion, workforce development. There is a clear intent behind the state law to use some of these revenues to help redress some of the wrongs for groups who are disproportionately affected by criminalization of cannabis. So I do think that we can take the lead there. And the mechanics of it, I think, are beyond me right now. I don't really have a clear picture of what we should specifically do in terms of a funding level. But I would support some degree of earmarking of these funds for the reparations assembly, or the reparations project, simply because that does seem to be one of several key areas of spending in the state program.
I guess one thing that I just want to make sure that everybody recognizes is that there are actually two revenue streams that come in from the sale of marijuana. One is impact fees and the other is excise tax, the share of the excise tax. And there are different rules about, there's restrictions on use of impact fees, but excise tax is excise tax, and communities are free to use excise tax as revenue in any shape that they feel appropriate. So I just want to make sure that that's understood. And Sonia, did we usually go to staff if the staff, because they may have something in information for us to consider. Sonia?
Yeah, I was just a little confused by Sean, what you said about the free cash appropriation to commit to that. We don't have an order, but we wouldn't put an order through until the fall. So maybe I'm too much of an accountant.
No, I'm saying we don't have an order.
Box.
Yeah, we don't have an order yet, is what I said.
Yeah, but so we're not recommending here.
Well, I think
today.
So the decision today, and for the finance committee, which is a little bit different than the way the process usually works, is when the finance committee makes a recommendation, you typically have an order in front of you to review and to consider. If the finance committee was going to make that recommendation today, all I'm saying is that you don't have an order to review because we don't have one yet. Because normally
they would
it
have to revisit it in the fall and re-recommend it though because there is no source right now.
Right. I think so. I think Sonia's right. I think Sonia's saying that because we don't actually have free cash certified, we can't prepare an order.
Putting the cart before the horse here.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's an important distinction to make. So we're asking for the commitment, not for,
The actual recommendation. Okay.
the actual recommendation. And that's exactly what we did last year, is the commitment actually happened, I think, on June 5th, or whatever it was in my memo there. And then the actual order wasn't voted until the fall. So both are true.
Just to clarify one thing, I believe that transfers into stabilization funds require a majority vote, and transfers out under current law require 2/3 vote.
Yeah, no, I might have flipped those. If I said 2/3 to go in, but I'll double check it.
Yeah. Alicia?
Yeah, thank you. At first, I just wanted to recognize and thank the AHRA for their the incredible amount of work that they have done and for their dedication and commitment to this committee, which is very important, but also very challenging work. So thank you all for taking this on. And I want to state that I am in complete support of taking some type of action towards this. And today, some of the things that I'm thinking about is that while we would like for there to be a permanent plan or a very detailed plan as to how the committee thinks that we should use reparation funds, that's extremely difficult to do if there's no realistic you can't really fathom your realistic fund and your pool and what you have access to. And so that limits the possibilities to narrow down and specify that at all. And so I think that the general list of things that might happen or might be able to happen I think that is sufficient. And I wouldn't expect them to be able to come up with more if there's a big difference between giving somebody $210,000 one time and having them know that is going to be replenished every single year. Those are two incredibly different things and might result into incredibly different outcomes in terms of what can be offered to the community. And I know that as a town, our budgets and finances are really tight and we're working on a lot of really important projects. But I don't believe that we have any current standing commitments to use these funds for any of those projects. Nor do I think we necessarily should. I think that the cannabis tax revenue has no better, there's no better reason or source for it to be used for. This is exactly the kind of programming, the kinds of restorative justice that those funds should be going to. And so I don't understand the difference between committing now and committing later in the year. I don't understand what things we think would change between now and July in terms of our budget and our finances. I think we have a pretty clear picture as to what we think or expect will happen, although we know that there will be some variation. And I don't think that those things will change depending on the commitment that we make to the AHRA and to establishing and identifying that fund, which we created this committee to do. And so I think delaying and prolonging them also doesn't make sense. And so I would support figuring out some type of commitment today that we could make towards identifying an ongoing revenue stream for AHRA from the cannabis revenue funds, and also earmarking or a commitment to earmarking and looking at these funds when it does come to the time for the free cash for this committee as well.
Matt, your hand is still up. Did I not get back to you, or I don't know if you had anything else to say? Okay.
Lynn's hand is up.
Yeah, Lynn, since you raised your hand, I was going to but go ahead, Lynn.
Please go ahead.
No, the only thing that I was going to make sure that it's understood, because it was kind of, I think there's a little bit of confusion in the time, and just to remind everyone, and if everybody knows what I'm going to report, I'll try and be brief, and I apologize. But the way that what happens is that at the end of the year, at the end of the fiscal year, we close books, and of course that's June 30th, and make a preliminary determination of the whether there's free cash left at the end of the year. And our policy is that there's a cap on the amount of free cash that we have, and we move excess free cash to stabilization. There's always been some level of excess free cash, and that enables us to do that. We do that after free cash is certified by the Department of Revenue, because they have to go over our books and approve what Sonia has been working on, and for the entire year, make adjustments to it, and then they certify an amount of free cash, which then gives us the ability to make the transfer. And we transfer to stabilization fund of any amount that's in excess of the balance that's in town financial policies of what's the maximum amount of free cash we feel appropriate to hold as free cash. So that's how the process occurs every year. What happened last year, which was our first year where we were operating with the second stabilization fund, because we have a general stabilization fund, which we've been intentionally building up in order to fund the capital projects, including the library and school building, elementary school. But we established this second stabilization fund for reparation. And that transfer, what we did at about this time, or around July 1, Michelle gave us the exact date, but it doesn't matter the exact date. But at that point, the recommendation was made from the Finance Committee to the Council, and the Council voted that it had the intention of making a transfer from free cash to the Reparation Stabilization Fund in the approximate amount of the prior year's revenue from excise tax for cannabis sales. And so that intention was what was voted, and then the actual transfer was voted in the fall. And so that was the process last year, and I think that we're kind of working through similar. So Sonia, what did I get wrong?
No, you got it right. I'm just going to throw a little monkey wrench into the whole thing here. Is our financial policy state that anything over 5% in free cash would get transferred to stabilization fund. So when would this kick in? Because we're going to be transferring money to the stabilization fund. So what if we don't reach that 5% in free cash? Do you know what I'm saying? So we hit because our policy states 5%. So we try to keep 5% of free cash at all times, and everything else goes into the stabilization funds. So I don't know. That's just one thing to consider. For us accountants that see it in black and white, what do we move here and what do we move here? So
Sonia, are you talking about the dedication of the revenues? Or
we're talking about transferring from free cash.
I guess that there's
in the fall, the
additional,
one.
Yeah, so anything over 5%, in some years that was a very small amount. So I know the last few years it's been really high, but that's not the norm. So I just want everybody to keep that in mind.
yeah, I mean, we do have that actually additional concern, which is what happens this year if, because of all of the inflation that we have been seeing in our costs for energy and food and other things that have been most particularly affected by inflation. We know that, for example, the departments that run vehicles have been paying higher costs for fuel for vehicles. So we may end up the year with less free cash. than we have in prior years. And so the what if question actually is an relevant additional question, Sean, and then I'm going to go back to the committee members.
Yeah, I mean, I think one reason, I mean, the committee could certainly signal a commitment now if they wanted to. I think one reason to reserve sort of a final decision to the fall is because I think you want to see the revenue projections going forward. There's a long time between now and the fall, and we don't know what's going to happen to the economy and all sorts of things along those lines. The way things are headed doesn't always sound great when we read the news. I think that we have enough information now that we can look at it both ways when we do our revenue projections in the fall. That might help inform the committee and inform their decision.
Okay, Lynn.
Andy, can I just jump in and remind AHRA members that if they'd like to speak at any point, as Andy said, please raise your hand and you'll be put in the queue.
Okay, the other thing that I need to make clear is that we do need to meet with the Superintendent of Public Works regarding a very important decision that needs to be recommended to the council regarding funding for the Centennial water treatment plant and the assurance that we have adequate drinking water into the future. And we also have a presentation that we need to hear from the assistant town manager after that regarding the North Common project and the funding for the North Common project. So that's why we do need to cap the discussion today, whether or not we reach a conclusion. Lynn?
So I just want to look at a couple things, okay? The first request is around free cash. And I personally have no problem with looking at it once it's certified. And I want to thank Sonia for bringing up our own fiscal policy, which is the one about the 5%. So that, but we won't know that question. We won't know the answer to that question until October, okay? We also won't know the answer to the question with regard to expected revenues, but let me just stay on the free cash for a moment. If we find out in the fall that above 5%, there is amount equal to what the revenues that we would find out in July for cannabis, then I think that is a very appropriate and considered thing to do at that time. If we find out that our free cash is less than 5%, then we have a bigger problem in that we now haven't followed our own fiscal policy. And that's a problem for me, okay? The second piece, and I want to just talk to the issue of, and believe me, I've raised money for all kinds of things over the years. I understand the chicken and the egg problem. You want to have money so that you can plan for it, and you want to be able to say to people, we have money, and therefore these plans are real, okay? I am very reluctant to ever earmark any money anytime. And I'm going to go back to my own personal experience, and I'm going to go back to one that I think the town probably had as well. Somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, we hit a rough spot with state revenues. I would get notices from funding agencies of rescissions for the fiscal year we were in right then. They would come in the middle of February and they would say, your budget is, your grant's been cut by 0.5% and by 50%. This is no lie. It happened again in 2008. The moment you designate anything as an earmark without flexibility, you then cut down your degrees of flexibility in terms of meeting those crises. We're not in one of those crises right now. I'm very concerned about the things we're seeing in the economy that could put us in that. But if the choice is, I can continue to employ 2 or 3 people in municipal government for the period from, February 1st to the end of June and not have to cut their job midterm, then I want as much flexible money as possible. And I'd like to think that the state and the town has all learned how to do this better. But we all thought we had learned how to do it better back in 2008. And Andy lived through that on the Finance Committee. Bernie, I think you might have been there too. So I really feel, first of all, we have to live by our policies and look at our free cash when it's certified. And at that point, knowing what the amount is for this year's cannabis, do that. And I think we can set up a system not unlike what we asked people to do for the percent for art bylaw. And that is, there are triggers by which at some point somebody can say, but this year we're just not able to do it because of X or because of Y. So I want some way in which we don't bind a future town administration and a future town council with earmarked funds that don't allow us the flexibility one needs in hard times. And we've seen hard times. We've seen them twice that I can remember in just my period of time in Massachusetts with all kinds of state and federal money. So what I would like is for us to seriously consider that we do make a commitment to look at this with free cash in the moment we have the certification. But I would also like us to look at any discussion about earmarking that allows us some trigger to get out of an earmark in any one year where we might need it. I will even tell you with that, I still am very hesitant to ever earmark. I made the same case when the housing authority, I'll think of it, John Hornick's group. Thank you. When they came to us and they wanted to take the Airbnb taxes and they wanted it earmarked. And I just have to say, every time you earmark something, you have to cut the degrees of freedom that you have in the budget to meet hard times. Now you've seen the fiscal conservative side of me.
So what I'm going to do is matter of process for today, and I appreciate that comment, as I probably would have offered it, but don't have to. I'm going to recognize Bob, then I'm going to turn to public comment for all issues that are on the table. At that point, I think that we do need to draw this to a conclusion, because I want to get to the Centennial plant, and I want to get to the North Common, because those there are real important and substantial fiscal consequences if we don't get that back to the council in a timely fashion, as will be explained.
Andy, before you move to Bob, can I just jump in quickly, please?
Yes, but please let us move through the process and get to public comment too.
Yeah, I just want to be in collaboration here since it's a shared meeting. And I think that what I've heard is there are members who would like to move forward with an action today. At least Alicia has made herself clear. I have also made myself clear. If that's not going to be the case, if we need to have further discussion about this in terms of making the commitment, not in terms of the details that everybody's been, and I think we need to maybe get into some of those details and get clarification on some of those details, like the 5% that Sonia brought forward. But if that's not going to be the case today, I want to make sure that we are committed to having a meeting in the very near future with the two committees to bring those actions forward, or I am going to bring them forward in a motion today.
Bob?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I do think that reparations is a priority for the town. It's certainly a personal priority. And I think the cannabis tax is a creative solution. However, I do share Lynn's concerns about earmarks, and earmarks can really become problematic if there isn't a sort of a safety valve on them. But what I would suggest, or what I would propose consideration, is putting reparations as a line item in the budget. And that way we can think about what we can afford every year to put into reparations, rather than kind of just saying, well, there's this tax amount, we don't know what it is, but we'll take that. So that's just a consideration. I don't expect anyone to decide on that now, but I think that might be a solution that gets around some of the issues with earmarking. Thanks.
Okay. I said that I wanted to get to public comment and then come back to the committee, but Alicia, I'll leave it to you to decide whether I should go ahead and see if there's public comment before or after you speak. So you're next.
If you don't mind, Andy, it's just very quick. I just want to say that I think that it would be irresponsible to use the cannabis tax revenue, at least a percentage of it, for anything other than restorative justice and investing back into the Black and Brown community.
Okay. Thank you. I was pausing because I didn't know. So what I'm going to do is I ask for whether there's anybody who wishes to make public comment who's in the attendee list to please raise their hand. And then I will recognize members of the public to make comment. They can make comment on the issue that we've been discussing today, or any other matter that should come before the Finance Committee, the ones that I've identified for today, or general, any issue is relevant. So I have one person who has asked to so far in this, so if there's anybody else, please feel free to raise your hand, but please bring Lauren into the room, Lauren Mills, and Mills, unmute your, thank you. And why don't you introduce yourself, tell us where you live, and please offer your comment.
Yes, hi, good afternoon.
We can hear you. Okay. Maybe she can't hear us.
Oh, sorry. Hello, my screen just went black. But can you hear me?
I can hear you and I can see you, so I don't know what the problem is on the other, going the other direction, but.
Okay, I'll try to make this quick. I'm Lauren Mills. I'm a 6-year resident of South Amherst, also a member of the Board of Health. And as a person of color, I just wanted to lend my comments and thoughts and show appreciation for the work that the AHRA has done, and also the town council and your discussion today. I have a couple of questions just from the discussion as to if there's two stabilization funds, how do you know which one would the free cash would go into for reparations. Like, how would you differentiate that if there's two stabilizations fund with the same name? Also, I really feel like the AHRA, if it does not continue as a committee, there really needs to be a nonprofit organization with Black stakeholders that have some degree of control over funding for reparations. Also, I would suggest that maybe there should be a fundraising required to access the funds that the town will set aside for reparations, and I also call it reparative justice initiatives. And I did have a comment prepared, so I'll just shorten it, but I'd like to read it. It says, this comment is in regard to the AHRA proposal to ask for a consistent stream of revenue for reparative justice initiatives that would enhance and benefit the Black and Brown communities of Amherst by setting aside a yearly amount of cannabis tax revenue for the purpose of building a sustainability stabilization fund that would be the town's responsibility, but would only be allocated for projects, items, and that are approved by an appointed committee or group of African heritage stakeholders, aligning organizations and advocates. Going beyond charity, a cannabis tax revenue stream for reparative justice could be used in multiple ways to ensure that there are funds available for annual large-scale foundational programming and projects such as Black artists in residence, educational scholarships for African heritage residents, economic investment in startup businesses, and cultural enrichment activities. And since I would just like to end my comments there, and thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Is there any other public comment that is to be offered today? Anybody else wish to be recognized? Seeing none, then I need to see if there's anybody who's in the meeting and thank you, Ms. Mill, who wishes to be recognized at this point. And I want to actually respond to the question. What we did last year was we knew that there was going to be a large enough amount of free cash at the end of the year that we could transfer the amount that was the estimated cannabis revenue. This year, we're not quite as certain, so we've never faced the question of how we would make that division before. I think that that's part of what's on the table here. If there was going to be a motion today, and I've only partly written it out, it would be something like the Finance Committee recommends that the Council requests the Finance Department to prepare an order to transfer an amount of free cash equal to the estimated FY22 cannabis excise tax revenue for consideration after free cash is certified. And Sean?
Did you say recommend to town staff?
Yes.
I mean, I think that works if you want, but usually you make recommendations to the council. But usually,
yeah, no, I think what the recommends that the council request.
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
That was the way that I had phrased it. So
okay.
It would be, the Finance Committee recommends that the council requests that the Finance Department prepare an order to transfer free cash to the Reparation Stabilization Fund in the amount of the estimated FY22. Wait, I'm getting thoughts mixed up on this. It would be the,
I think it would be an amount equivalent to the FY22 cannabis taxes that are collected.
yes. Excise tax revenue for consideration after free cash is certified. That would seem approximately to be the motion that would close out the substantial portion of the discussion today.
Andy, are you making a motion or are you just suggesting language?
I'm suggesting language, leaving it to, if somebody says, yep, I make that motion, then the motion's made, seconded, we'll then proceed to discuss the motion so we can close this for today.
I see Alicia's hand is raised.
Alicia?
Thank you. I would like to make the motion, but I also just have a question regarding the second portion of it, which was the ongoing commitment for the cannabis tax revenue, and if that will come to another discussion at a later time, or if we are looking to also make a separate motion on that part of it.
I think that today we probably can only go part way, not because of anything other than I see Dave Zomack is in the attendee group and needs to be brought into the meeting, but also Guilford is here and we have 2 other agenda items to solve in a minimum time. I think that we need to decide to take that up at our in a July meeting at our whenever we schedule our next meeting, which is not yet scheduled.
Okay. I think that sounds okay with me. If there are other members of the Finance Committee who are also okay with putting that vote off, I would like to move the first motion forward. Andy.
Okay, let me just ask if there's a second from a member of the Finance Committee who is a voting member.
Second, Miller.
Okay, so there's a motion that's made and seconded. Bill, do you need help?
Yeah, I have to have it read to me so I can get it, or you can email it to me.
Do you have it or do you need it?
No, I didn't type it while you were sort of talking through it, so I need it.
Do you want to read it back to us as you have it? And we'll
No, I don't have it, so I need you to read it to me again or email to me is what I'm saying.
Okay. But again, we can also do it both ways. I can email it to you too, but that the Finance Committee recommends that the Council request the Finance Committee to prepare an order that will transfer the amount of free cash to stabilization in the estimated amount of FY23 cannabis excise tax revenue to be considered upon the certification of free cash for FY22. Can
I offer 2 friendly amendments?
Yes.
I think you wanted to say actual FY22 receipts.
Okay. I will. It will have to make sure that the maker and seconder are all in agreement of what we have, because we were really trying to word craft their motion.
I'm okay with that wording. I was just wondering if Sean, did you have, because you said two friendly suggestions. Was there something else or was that the only one?
I think changing estimated to actual and changing FY23 to FY22. So that was both of them.
Okay. Thank you, Sean.
Michelle, that's okay with you?
That's fine, yes.
Yeah. Elkar's had his hand up. Can I recognize Michelle?
Of course, yeah.
Elkar.
So just saying thank you for bringing this motion forward today and encouraging the voting members to go ahead and approve it. You know, this one of the things, and I believe me, I have had to be a fiscal conservative too in my chairing a department at the University of Massachusetts in 2008 when the world went through the Great Recession, and we got our rescission scenarios, our budget cutting scenarios, and I really wish then that there might have been a fund set aside for a small department focused on fighting anti-Black racism to be able to save it from some of the worst cuts. This is what the fund provides. The fund provides that when you do go into these hard times, that some of the most vulnerable sectors of the town have a little cushion, have a little place to go to where some things can be done to save them, to preserve the climate, to help them as they face things in a more drastic way than perhaps some of the other the less vulnerable and the less harmed sectors of the community. This is what makes the importance of having this little pool of resources that are dedicated. You haven't spent it. You're going to get the chance to vote when you do decide to spend it at a 2/3 threshold. That power is yours, okay? And that power is yours in the face of whatever the hard time is when the proposals come forward on actually spending. So you'll have the full discretion there. This is just about making the statement that this is a part of the ongoing values of this town, that we're reserving some of this pool of our funds, okay, equivalent to the cannabis tax revenues, excise taxes collected, that we are dedicating them for restorative justice, reparative justice measures that help the most harmed members of our community. So I again just encourage you to pass this forward and to have the conversation going forward about future spending. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Al. Michelle, I want to conclude and get to a vote because we have those two other items and it's getting later than we expected.
Yes, may I make one more comment, please, just in wrapping this all up? And I'd like to just be assured that we can schedule a meeting to complete the discussion on the designation of cannabis tax revenue for reparations. I am not comfortable with letting that go into the fall before we make that decision. And as I said, I ask you from the bottom of my heart to understand that we have a lot of momentum here. We're working really hard and we're trying to work within this system here. And so if we could please come together to settle a meeting time before the end of this meeting for that vote and recommendation to occur, I would very, very much appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know that we will have time, but let's turn it also say that we can make a commitment right now that it is likely that the next meeting will be July. If we don't schedule a July meeting, and I tend to doubt we'll have time to schedule a July meeting, that it's our understanding that the intent is to put that on the agenda for the July meeting. But I just don't know that we can do more, that we can get to scheduling a meeting. That always takes time to have everybody go through their calendars and that kind of thing. And I don't want to do that if we can avoid it. Lynn, I want to keep moving, but I do want to see if you have any.
I would like a clarification on the motion. The motion is to prepare the fiscal order, but it still has to be voted on either by the finance committee and recommended to the council or for the full council.
Well, it certainly would have to be voted by the full council in the fall, and whether it's referred to back to the finance committee or not, I think is a decision that as president you would make.
Okay. I wanted to clarify that it was to prepare that, but there still had to be a vote of somebody In this case, it would be the town council ultimately.
There still has to be a vote because it was to prepare an order. It was in.
Lynn, does the policy discussion have to come first with a recommendation from this committee? Or can we bring it as we had planned to do on June 13th to the full town council without a recommendation?
They can't vote on June 13th without the purchase order in front of them. I mean, the
You
fiscal order
can't
in
have the
front of-
order. This is because the
No,
motion
I'm
is-
talking about the policy to designate cannabis tax revenue for reparations. Does that need to have a recommendation from this committee? Or can it be brought to the council on the 13th as we had planned for a vote of the full council without a recommendation from this committee?
No, I mean, I guess I can only say that my preference is that the committee have more time to conclude that discussion, but we do not have time today to have that discussion, and we just need to move forward. We wanted to do something. I think that there was a real desire to take a concrete step, and that's why I made the suggestion that we do what we did last year and at least keep pace with what we did last year, because I think falling behind last year was just not an acceptable approach. I really am concerned about our timing now. So if there's other discussion that affects the motion, otherwise let's vote on the motion.
I think Bill has his hand up, Andy.
Yeah, Bill.
Do you want me to just read to you exactly what I have for the motion so we can be clear about what we're voting on?
Yes.
So I have
Go.
Walker moved and Miller seconded that the Finance Committee recommend that the Town Council prepare an order to transfer an amount of free cash to a stabilization fund in the amount of the FY 2022 cannabis tax receipts. Is that correct?
Thought it was the staff.
Okay.
So it was the Finance Committee recommends that the council requests Finance Department to prepare an order.
Got it.
And I think the word actual might have been in there, but I'm not sure if I heard you say that, Bill.
Yeah, I said it.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So I'm going to
Andy,
call for.
Did you already vote? Did you already vote? The vote.
No.
One other friendly amendment, and again, this I defer to you and Lynn on this, is do you want the council to direct the finance office or the town manager? I think typically the council directs the town manager.
We need to
Yeah,
have it
change
be
it to-
town manager.
Is it, if that's okay with the maker and seconder, change it to town manager?
That is okay with me.
Okay, hearing no objection, let's proceed to a vote. And I think Kathy was the. I'll start with myself and I'll vote yes and move in alphabetical order. Alicia,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Bob,
I support.
Matt,
Support.
Bernie,
Support.
and Michelle
Yes.
and Kathy.
No, I don't support.
So you're voting no. So it's 4-0 with 3 members, resident members in support.
4-1.
4-1.
4-1, I'm sorry, 4-1, got it. I'm sure that Bill would have had it if I didn't, but thank you. For you, it's 4-1. So with that said, and I think that we understand what is intended for the July meeting when scheduled. We're going to thank the members of the Reparations Assembly for being present. Michelle, I think that it would be helpful if you adjourn the meeting, and then I want to let Sean direct us as to the order of the 2 items that we need to absolutely do.
So adjourning the AHRA meeting at 4:50 p.m.
Okay.
Thank you, members.
Okay, Sean, you want to introduce one of the next two items? We have Dave and Guilford both here.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of maybe the North Common makes sense to go next because I'm hoping it's a quicker item and then we can spend the rest of the time on Centennial. Dave, Guilford, are you okay with that if we go with North Common next?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess I'll turn over to Dave to introduce this. There was a memo put in the packet. It was put in a little later, but there was a memo in the packet for people who need the background.
Or Guilford, are you sure I can wait? I know we had slated Centennial to go first, but
You know what, Dave? Why don't we go with Centennial first, actually, just in case, because Centennial is the one that has the real time sensitive piece to it.
yeah, that was the plan, and I don't, Guilford was here for that, so.
Okay. Guilford, do you want me to introduce this topic, or do you want to go ahead?
You can go ahead, Sean.
Okay. So just building off of last night, the Centennial project has escalated in its cost. A couple times. We've had different cost estimates provided by, this is Weston and Sampson as our engineer. Guilford, is that correct?
No, it's Tata and Howard.
Tata and Howard for this one. Okay. So they've updated our cost estimates a few different times. It's gotten more expensive each time. The latest and hopefully the final cost estimate is for a little less than $18 million. Fortunately, we were accepted into the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund program, which provides a 19.8% loan forgiveness, and it provides financing at a rate of 1.5%, which is much better than market rates these days. The slight downside is that they're only doing that for $14 million of the project, because at the time we submitted, that was the cost estimate. So we will still have to borrow the other $4 million the way we normally do and pay market rates for that other $4 million, unless we have asked the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund if there's any way they could increase the amount that we're in for because the cost estimates went up. They might be able to go another $1 million. I think there's a cap on what they can do. I think that cap's around 15 million.
15.
I don't think we can count on that. So, but we have asked. So what we have asked the council to do is to rescind the previous debt authorization for 11 million for Centennial, and to authorize the 18 million and authorize us to essentially accept the entry into this program, which will provide these terms. And the program needs the full amount of the project authorized by June 30th in order for us to proceed. I also described last night that we potentially have another funding source in the forward bill, but that's a long ways off, and we can't count on that either. But if there's strong advocacy and that does come to fruition, this program combined with the money in the forward bill, which was 3.5 million, would get us back down to actually below our original cost estimates for this project in terms of the impact on the rates and the annual debt payment. So today, if we're happy to answer any questions. I've modeled, I would say these are rough models of the impact on the rates under different scenarios, but I can share those with you if you want to see them. And then we ask that you make the recommendation today if possible.
Okay, and just so now, do you have prepared orders, or do you?
Yeah, in the memo, there's two orders. There's the order to rescind and the order to authorize the new total amount.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having something in my throat. Let's have the orders when we get ready, but let's have discussion first. Bob?
Yeah, Sean, can you just clarify what the difference in the total cost to the town is with the increase, but with being part of the, getting a lower rate and getting some of it forgiven? Where do we stand in terms of what we sort of already thought of as the total cost of this project?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I just had to do it on the calculator real quick. So the original project that we authorized was around 11 million. This project, this new, if we go forward with this new amount, or sorry, we have to go for the new amount, but with the drinking water state revolving fund program, they provide the 19.8% forgiveness on $14 million. So if you multiply those numbers together, subtract it from the 18 million, it brings our new cost in around 15.2. So we'd be looking at around 15.2 million versus the 11 million that we originally planned on.
What did we assume the interest rate was in the original?
So in the original, no, that's a good question. The original, we assumed an interest rate in the high twos at the time. So having the interest rate on the 14 million at 1.5 helps offset the impact of the higher total cost. So the impact on rates, it does impact rates by authorizing the higher amount, but it's not as much as it otherwise would because of that favorable rate.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Kathy?
John, did we also get a separate amount that was an absolute allocation, or is it just the loan?
So the 19.8% loan forgiveness is like almost like a grant portion of this. So once the project is done, we had conversations with them recently. They take that portion off the top and then finance the rest.
Okay.
So that comes out to a little over $2 million, that 19.8% of the 14 million that was approved.
Okay, at one point I thought there was a 2 or 3 million in addition to the loan, but this was part of it.
No, yeah, so that was the Forward Act, that if the Forward bill, that included a separate $3.5 million Mass Works grant for this specific project.
That's the bill that's stuck.
That's the bill that's,
yes.
Yeah, politics has sort of brought it to a halt. Yeah.
Okay. And our representatives understand that, along with Pittsfield and a bunch of other towns where we would
Pretty
like.
much, yeah, every community I think had something in that bill that would benefit them. So.
Okay. And can I just, building on what Bob, if there's a chance we would still get that, would we be able to prepay down some of the debt we're about to incur to do this, or?
Yeah, I mean, the timing could be problematic. So that's why I think we want to push to know about that as soon as possible. I will ask the question of the state revolving fund. A lot of times when you borrow money, you can't sort of prepay or refinance until a certain period of time. So that they get their guaranteed interest over a certain number of years. With the state revolving fund, we will have to check to see if there's the ability for us to maybe pay off some of that loan and or restructure it to get the rates down on an annual basis. Because really what we want to do is borrow the least amount of money as possible to get the annual payments down.
Yeah, so I wasn't saying in any way that I was not for this. I was just looking for that. Could we actually, you answered my question. Thank you.
Guilford?
You can prepay and pay down your principal if you have money come forward. Remember, this program has so much money, and as you spend the money and as people pay it back, that allows them to then give more loans to other people. So there's no restriction on early payments or paying down loan debt.
Good.
Anything else? Because otherwise, then the first motion we would need is a motion to recommend to the town council order FY 2213 in order rescinding authorization for unissued bonds.
So moved.
Is your second?
Jane seconds.
Okay, any further discussion on that motion? Seeing no requests for recognition for speaker, then Alicia, in the vote?
Yes.
Lynn?
Yes.
Bob?
I support.
Matt?
Support.
Bernie?
Support.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Kathy,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So it's unanimous with support of 3 resident members. And the second order that we have, you want to put it on, is it available to put on the screen too? Because I know you think there were 2 orders. So the motion this time would be to recommend to the town council approval of appropriation and borrowing authorization order FY 2209A, in order approving and authorizing borrowing capital fund projects bond authorization.
So
Motion.
moved.
Second.
Shane seconds.
Yeah, there's been a motion made and second. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing no request for discussion, I will turn to vote and start this time with Lynn
Yes.
and Bob.
I support.
Matt. Matt? Is he still here?
He's still here, but he's muted.
Okay.
Sorry, I support Andy. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Bernie?
Support.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yes.
I'm a yes, and then Alicia.
Yes.
Okay, so again, it's unanimous with 3 members. President.
Thank you very much.
Support. So I think that takes care of that. So do you want to introduce Dave, or just let Dave take over?
Dave, go ahead.
Thanks for the introduction, Sean.
Dave Zomack, our assistant town manager, everybody.
Anyway, thank you all. I know it's been a long meeting for you and lots of important topics, so I'll try to be brief. What Sean and Sonia and I and others have been working on, of course, is the North Common project. You've heard a lot about it through the years. I guess I would start out with the great news that we just received a large grant through the Commonwealth, but from the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund. The grant is for $827,000 and change. And this is, to support the renovation, the restoration of the North Common. You do recall, I'm sure, that the council voted on a concept plan some months ago. That is the plan we are moving forward with. And at the time, when we put together the budget, we were talking about some other funds supporting that project, including transportation funds from the transportation fund, which is not doing incredibly well right now. So the good news here is that this federal money can be used to match the already appropriated CPA money. So we will not need any transportation fund money to do this project. And I think I apologize that we got you this memo with such short time for review before this meeting, but I think we're all trying to get as much done during June as possible. And our goal was to present this to the council at their meeting on Monday night, the 13th. The request before you includes an outline of the motion and what actions we are looking for the council to take, hopefully with your recommendation. It includes a project budget of 1.813214. It includes a schedule. The goal of this project would be to have this out to bid in the fall of this year and be under construction in May or June of 2023. It would be at least a 4-month construction, maybe 5 to 6 months. We really don't know at this point. And then, of course, the memo also includes the concept plan that the council approved some months ago. And let me just quickly go over what the order does. So the order essentially appropriates the sum that I just mentioned, 1.8 1.813214. That's the overall project budget. And keep in mind that we do have to match every dollar one for one. The 827,000 needs to be matched by CPA dollars. We would be using the full $986,148 from CPA. It authorizes the town manager to accept these grant funds and any other grant funds that we might pull into this project. And it authorizes the treasurer to issue a grant anticipation note. And I'll leave this to Sonia or Sean, but my understanding is we don't go out to bond this project. This is really an internal process. This is a reimbursement grant. So we expend the money to contractor X, and then we get reimbursed by the state along the way. And then the final piece of this is that the grant does require us to transfer the care, custody, and control of that small section of the common, which is outlined in the memo, to the Recreation Commission. And keep in mind, the common is part of the public way. So this is a rather unique process. We have vetted this. I know Guilford has been around the table, as well as the town manager, and we vetted this with town council, as well as the state overseeing this grant program. And this is commonly how they do it. A portion of the common would essentially become what's called Article 97 land. This is land dedicated to passive recreation, if you will. That'll include areas for picnicking, areas, a plaza for the various Memorial Day and Veterans Day and other ceremonies that we have out in front of Town Hall. And then it would include seating areas and other areas for eating and socializing, as was outlined in the North Common presentations that many of you saw months ago. So let me stop there. That's what is on the table. Very excited to be bringing this amount of money and this large grant to the project, and not tapping into the depleted transportation fund. So thank you. I'll stop there. And if Sonia or Sean wanted to add anything, by all means, please do.
Yeah, I'll just add that the order for this one was a draft order was put in the packet. We have had a couple small revisions since that draft was put in, but I wouldn't say they're anything material. So there is a draft order to consider. And this is really sort of similar to what we just did with Centennial and what we've done in the past with some other projects where we got a grant. We have to authorize the full amount of the project in order to receive the grant. It's not changing the amount of town funds that are going towards the project. In fact, it's actually reducing the amount of town funds that are going towards the project.
Okay, Dave, my recollection is that there's precedent for transferring to the equivalent of the Recreation Commission, because I think I can remember previous transfers to the LSSE Commission for similar purposes.
Yes, that we have done that. And it's a requirement of it's a requirement of the state, both for CPA as well as the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. Cherry Hill Golf Course has this requirement. Mill River Recreation Area, War Memorial Pool, and Grove Park. All of those have this requirement, and we did identify a project area. Essentially, the state and federal government want to hold cities and towns accountable to say, we're giving you a large sum of money, and we want you to dedicate these to passive recreation, if you will. In this case, Land and Water Conservation does fund a number of commons projects throughout Massachusetts. And this is kind of unique in that it is the public way.
Okay, Kathy, see you.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Dave. I have two questions. One, let me start with what was my second. My second question is on this transfer to the recreation. Does that mean that in perpetuity, this is now grass and green. And would it restrict if we needed to shrink it a bit for parking? Say the back end parking didn't work well. The plan was to add some spaces along Main Street right by the bus stop. Guilford had one point shown a drawing that took a little bit of the edge of the common off. So would we, once we take this money, does that total piece of land have to stay? When you said what's the level of restriction on it? That's question one. And the second one's a little bit easier, I think. When I looked at the timeline, it looks like we will still be in construction when UMass and Amherst College come back into session. So I'm just thinking about the disruption of downtown, and probably there isn't any way you can start it when they go home and have it finished before they come back. So that was just a question on the timeline on that. I believe the library, Sean will know this. When would the library construction start to happen? I'm just thinking of what does downtown look like? You know, when we're tearing off half of the library and trying to move stuff out, and we're tearing up the North Common toward, and there may be nothing we can do about that timeline, but it will not make things easy for people to come down and go out to eat. Or I personally will try to avoid downtown when this is going on. I know some routes. It's like Route 9 right now. I know some routes. So so that's my second question.
Yeah, well, let me take the second one first, if I could, Kathy, through, and that is, yeah, the answer is there's no easy way to do this. You know, weather is a big factor. Supply chain is a big factor. We essentially have, from July 1st of this year to about June 1st of 2024 to get this done. So it's a pretty small window given the building season in Massachusetts, in New England. And yeah, there's going to be some short-term pain for what amounts to a 50 to 100-year project. So, but having said that, we're really talking about the area from the sidewalk at Spring Street. So essentially, you know, the Spring Street parking lot will be open during this construction. And we will, working with Guilford, my understanding is that the contractor will likely work from south to north. So yes, it will be fenced. And again, it'll be kind of a short-term period of, you know, aesthetically unpleasing area, but I think they can work fairly quickly. The most of this project is earthwork, drainage, then sidewalk work, lighting, those kinds of things. So there's not much vertical construction at all. There's some retaining walls to deal with the water on the site and the erosion that we now see out there. But it can go fairly quickly. But yeah, it's gonna make summer you know, a little aesthetically unpleasing. But I think if all other parking is retained in town, it should be a short-term nuisance for people, and hopefully it'll be that. The first question is a little more difficult, but I think the short answer, Kathy, is yes, it does prohibit us from changing the plan. So, and frankly, we knew that all along, because if we use CPA dollars to do this project, which was the plan all along, that's the only thing we have to do this project, CPA dollars and now this grant. The CPA dollars come with an assumption that you will not change this project area into something else. Now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, if we need X, Y, or Z, and future leaders of the town decide that, there may be a way to change that. But in the near term, the idea would be to keep it as a park-like setting, a common-like setting for people to enjoy, and for us to have celebrations and whatnot, from the Merry Maple to Veterans Day, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, and the list goes on and on. So that's the goal of the project.
And just adding to what Dave said, to one of your questions, Kathy, the library, Jones Library construction is the latest timeline is October 2023 is when that would start.
Okay, the one finishes and the other starts. So just Dave, on the CPA one, the original CPA had a picture with the parking lot on it. So that picture got changed after they voted out it. You know, I know the sequence of it, but it had parking on the green, and that was removed when it went to the council. So they did approve one set of graphics, and we did a different diagram. Yeah.
Right, but yeah, I mean, the council vote supersedes it. It is ultimately the council approved a plan with no parking on the common, not the plan with parking on the common. So I don't go back to the CPA vote. If I go back to the council vote that included CPA dollars for the project, which would then require that this be green space and walkways and seating and lighting and all of those.
Thank you.
Michelle?
Yeah, I apologize. I had to switch over to my phone, so I may have missed this, but were there some visuals that were presented for this project? And is this the project that was voted by the last council and is now being represented at this time?
So the short answer there is there are many visuals. I'm sure that Sean and Sonia can maybe send the FinCom a link to the visuals. There is a plan developed by DPW, Paul Dethier at DPW, and there have been dozens of public meetings and public presentations on the project, including illustrations done by Weston and Sampson on what, again, these are illustrative. They're not exact representations of what will be built, but there are people enjoying the new rehabilitated North Common at ceremonies and different events that are illustrated in the Weston and Sampson images. And then I think your second part of it, Michelle, was
Page 5 of your memo also has a map.
Yeah,
Dave,
it has a map, but I know there are some wonderful illustrations of people using the new renovated common as we envision it. We are not bringing the project back. The design is not coming back to the council, Michelle. We are simply looking for the authorization to move forward using the grant funds that we've just been awarded.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to place this in my, we received something from Paul just the other day, and I had inquired about getting more information because it sounded like it was something that had been decided by the previous council. And I don't remember seeing more information. And then of course I had to switch off over into my phone. So I want to be able to support this. I just don't feel like I have all of the information, and that's no fault of anyone, but that's where I'm at.
Andy, I can't raise my hand, but I would like to speak.
Yes, please.
Michelle, this actually goes back to the previous select board who booted it to the town council. So it's been out there for now going on 5 or 6 years. I would like to say that I totally support this. I want to compliment our staff for both this grant and the loan. These are big achievements for our town. And this is particularly allowing us to move forward and perhaps not even use all of our CPA money. So I'm prepared to make a motion at any point.
Me too.
Okay. Do you want to frame the motion, or do you want me to frame the motion?
I'll be glad to frame it.
Okay.
I move that we recommended the town council appropriation, transfer, and dedication order FY 22-05F, an order authorizing and appropriating funds for the capital improvement of the North Common.
Shane seconds.
There's motion been made and seconded. Michelle, your hand is still up, but okay. Any further Any further discussion, questions? If not.
My only big question is, Sean, we don't have to rescind anything on this, right?
I don't think so. You're already,
We're accepting additional money and we're,
yeah,
There's
just looking at no, it's not rescinding, but just the CPA funds, Sonia, is it consolidating it into?
It's just repurposing old capital, so it's
Okay.
repurposing all the articles that
Okay.
they voted.
right.
Yeah, this order takes care of everything.
Okay, thank you. That was all. I
And again,
needed.
just to clarify again, this order may change slightly by the time you see it again at the council level, just because we've been going back and forth with the state on exactly what has to be in it.
I'm fine with that.
Before you vote, could I just make one clarifying note in the memo under request E? It says to transfer the care, custody, and control of a portion of the town common. I believe that should say from the town council. We'll clarify this, but it's from the town council to the Recreation Commission, because the town common is in the public way, which is the purview of the town council. So we will clarify that before this comes on Monday night, but I'm quite sure that should have read town council, and I'll work on that with our town attorney, Lynn, before Monday night.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, questions? Seeing none, then I'll proceed to a vote and start with Bob Hegner. Bob?
I support.
Matt?
Support.
Bernie?
Support.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Alicia?
Yes.
And trying to think where I started. Lynn?
Yes.
I think, did we start with Bob, I believe. So I think we have everybody, and it's a unanimous vote with support of all three members of the committee. We've gone over our estimated time for the day, which is unfortunate, but those things do happen. And so I'm trying to take a quick look at the agenda myself that I should have available to look at quickly.
I'm going to sign off, Andy. Thank you very much. To the
thank you very
committee,
much,
everybody.
Dave.
Thanks,
And I think
Dave.
that
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So number 7 was financial orders to implement committee recommendations, but I think that we have all of the financial orders that were available for consideration. Future meeting planning, what I'm proposing is that one of us, Sean, Athena, or I will send out a poll with some suggested dates for July. We will try for one July meeting. That at this point, we do not anticipate the need for another June meeting. We have worked hard as a committee so that we really deserve the time off, and I think we should take it for ourselves, other than we have a bunch of reports to complete, and those need continued work. So I will do that. It's also understood, and we've talked about further, that we will return to further discussion of the reparations issues. There was one reparation issue that's remaining. Will be an item for the July meeting. I will try and schedule the July meeting now, because I want to consult with staff about what they anticipate is going to be available and what are needs for summer meetings. And I think that pretty much takes care of the planning part. The other thing that I'll just mention is that I want to thank those of you who sent in comments on what was labeled as draft 1. I have been working this morning on taking those comments and incorporating it into the beginning of a draft 2, and then I'm going to be adding the various sections that have been that I've received from those of you who send me sections for, and I think I have most of them for the rest of the second part of the report. If you didn't, please get me your what you're recommending. If you have questions or concerns about how to proceed or having problems, contact me individually. I don't want to do that in a public meeting, but I do need to get this report completed so we can get it to the council. I will try and get a draft 2 out as quickly as I can. Even if it's incomplete, I will get it so that we continue to just get you the chance to review it and can narrow down the amounts that remain to be reviewed as I proceed. I have no other unanticipated business. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they would like to raise, so I'll pause for a moment and make sure that John and Sonia have nothing else to raise. And I think the answer is no. So seeing nobody has raised hands for other in the anticipated business, I will declare the meeting adjourned, and thank you. And I appreciate that everybody was able to stay, and it took longer, but we've accomplished a lot. And enjoy the rest of the month and the holiday that will follow shortly thereafter, and we'll find a July date. And I will be contacting you about drafts as we go along. So thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.